Early in the morning, Seth wakes up to begin another dull day in his life. He has no friends or family, and his only company are the dogs at the animal control center where he works. After making sure they're all fed, he enters the cage with Lexi and hugs her, just to feel a bit of affection. One night, he takes the bus home and is surprised to see Holly. He approaches to greet her, but she doesn't recognize him. He explains that they went to high school together. They were never close, as Seth was a year older and only knew Holly because she was popular. He notices she's writing in a notebook and calls her a writer. Holly explains that she works as a waitress and that writing is just a hobby. Seth tries to make a joke, but the atmosphere turns awkward. A few moments later, Holly gets off the bus, and Seth tries to ask her out, but she doesn't hear him. That night, he looks her up on social media and is pleased to discover she has a dog. The next day, Seth asks his co-worker Nate for advice on how to win over a girl. Nate tells him to be confident and make her laugh. Later, Seth is devastated to learn that Lexi has to be euthanized. He takes her out of the cage, holds her gently on the table, and speaks to her softly. When the vet reminds him that he could adopt her to save her, Seth explains that he lives in a building where pets aren't allowed and can't afford to move. Lexi dies after receiving the injection, and Seth takes her body to the crematorium. Later, while removing Lexi's nameplate from the cage, Seth hears a noise coming from the restricted area. He opens the door but finds nothing unusual. After work, he keeps watching Holly's social media and starts taking notes on everything he learns about her. He analyzes every photo for clues and eventually figures out where she works. The next day, he goes to the restaurant where Holly waits tables and has to reintroduce himself because she still doesn't recognize him. He tries to compliment her hair, but she stays professional and simply serves his food. Shortly after, he asks her out, but Holly declines, saying she has a boyfriend. Seth immediately replies that she doesn't, which makes her uncomfortable. Holly leaves the bill on the table and walks away. That night, on her way home, she feels like someone is following her. In fact, Seth is hiding in the bushes near her house. Holly tells her roommate Claire that someone is outside, but Claire thinks she's just being paranoid. Then Holly gets a call from her ex-boyfriend Eric, completely drunk. After ending the call, Claire tells her she should forgive Eric for everything he did. Being alone is worse. Holly rejects the idea and decides to drink instead. The next morning, when she arrives at the restaurant, Holly finds a huge bouquet of flowers with a card that simply says, "Be mine." After her shift, she visits Eric at the bar and asks him to stop sending gifts, but he insists he wasn't the one who sent the flowers. He tries to convince her to get back together, but Holly reminds him that he cheated. Moments later, Seth walks into the bar and watches from afar. When Holly steps outside to smoke and write in her notebook, he follows and tries to talk to her. Holly still doesn't recognize him and says she's leaving. Seth then reveals that he was the one who sent the flowers, and Holly finally remembers him, realizing she's being stalked. Desperate, Seth swears he's not a psychopath and just wants to talk, saying he's never forgotten her since high school. Holly tries to leave again, but he blocks her path, causing her to panic. She pushes him and rushes back inside the bar, where Eric notices Seth chasing her. After Holly explains that he tried to grab her, Eric jumps over the counter and punches Seth. Bleeding on the floor, Seth starts laughing. Eric kicks him again and Holly has to stop him. Eric throws Seth out of the bar, warning him never to come back. As he rolls on the ground, Seth notices Holly dropped her notebook. Later at home, he treats his wound and begins to read it, discovering it's a personal diary. It reveals what Holly truly feels, and Seth spends the entire night reading every word, feeling deeply connected to her inner rage. The next day at work, he goes into the restricted area and finds a hatch in the floor. He climbs down and discovers an abandoned room still connected to the power grid, which gives him an idea. Over the following days, Seth dedicates himself to his plan. He buys materials online and follows a tutorial to build a cage in the hidden room. He keeps studying Holly's diary and even steals drugs from the shelter's infirmary. At home, he tests the sedative and instantly falls asleep without side effects. A few nights later, Holly is walking home when she realizes she's being followed. She stops and looks around, but Seth has already hidden. She keeps walking, still uneasy, then suddenly turns and sprays pepper spray, accidentally hitting a homeless man. Panicking, she runs off while Seth watches from the shadows. He decides to follow the man as he starts yelling in the middle of the night. Moments later, Seth climbs over a wall and enters Holly's apartment through the window. She's in the bathroom taking medication when she hears a noise. Rushing into the living room, she only sees the open window. She closes it, then heads to her bedroom, where Seth attacks and injects her with the sedative. Holly struggles for a few seconds before passing out. Afterward, Seth hides Holly inside a large box and takes her to the shelter. When Nate questions him, Seth lies, saying the boss called him in the middle of the night for a delivery. Nate believes him and only asks that he log the entry. Holly begins to wake up and makes a noise inside the box. Seth twists it slightly to cover the sound. She makes another noise, and this time Nate hears but blames it on the air conditioner. Seth leaves after dropping off the box, and Holly wakes up completely alone, locked inside the cage in the abandoned room. She panics, trying to open the door, and ends up ripping off a fingernail in the process. She grabs the bars and screams for help, but only the dogs hear her. They bark frantically, though Nate assumes they're just restless. The next morning, Seth brings Holly a bedpan and speaks softly to her, but she insults him. He coldly tells her she's lost the right to food and that they can try again tomorrow. He ignores her screams as he walks out. As soon as he's gone, Holly starts filing the bars with the padlock chain. The following day, Seth finally gives her a little water and food. She desperately clings to his leg, begging him not to leave. But he insists that it's important to establish boundaries in a relationship and repeats that they'll try again tomorrow. That night, Holly begins hallucinating Claire, who describes all the terrible things Seth is going to do to her. Holly loses her temper and yells at Claire to shut up. Eventually, she's forced to use the bedpan and panics when a rat crawls near her. Horrified, she kicks it repeatedly until it dies. The next day, Seth has to clean up all the blood. Holly asks if he's going to assault her. He says no, but when she asks if he's going to kill her, he replies, "I hope not," leaving her terrified. Seth explains that he might not have a choice if he fails to save her. Holly assumes it's some kind of religious cult, but Seth says it's not about him. It's about her. He insists that she's special, that he was lost and alone before meeting her, and that he truly believed she could see him for who he was. But then he realized that wasn't real, that it was just the version of Holly she wanted others to see, and all of it was a lie. He asks who the real Holly is, saying he needs to know if she's worth saving, otherwise she'll never leave that place. Holly only insults him. Seth walks away. As he exits the restricted area, Nate suddenly appears, reminding him he shouldn't be wandering around there. Nate orders him to clean up while he checks the door, but it's locked. That night, the hallucination of Claire asks Holly what she's going to do, and Holly answers that she'll wait. The next morning, Seth shows her that he found the diary. He says he feels sorry for her, especially because she writes about love in such a sad way. Holly fires back that a creepy stalker doesn't know what love is either. Then Seth mentions Claire, revealing that he's heard Holly talking to her and using two different voices. He asks if Claire is in the room, and Holly replies no, but says she can see her standing right behind him. Holly admits she knows Claire isn't really there, but Seth insists he isn't talking only about that room. It turns out Holly has hallucinations of Claire at home too. As Seth digs deeper into the diary's events, the truth finally comes out. Claire was real. She lived with Holly back when Holly was engaged to Eric. Over time, Claire had an affair with him, and Holly found out by checking Eric's emails. During a car trip, Holly confronted Claire, who apologized and said it meant nothing. Furious, Holly started driving recklessly, shouting about what Claire had done. She swerved to avoid other cars, but eventually lost control, and the vehicle crashed. Both women woke up covered in blood. Holly found a shard of glass embedded in her abdomen. When she heard Claire speak, she pulled out the glass and stabbed her in the eye, killing her. Later, the police believed Claire had died in the crash. In the present, Holly insists she's a fiction writer, while Seth admits that's exactly why he needed to be sure before going to the police. Seth tells Holly that he's been following her for days and discovered that, ever since Claire's death, she has been killing random people on the streets in brutal ways. She was the one who set the homeless man on fire. Seth believes Holly keeps her diary because she wants to be discovered and punished for Claire's death. But he isn't there to punish her. He's there to save her. Holly agrees that she wants to be saved just before Seth leaves. Then the hallucination of Claire appears and applauds Holly for her performance. Holly admits she's lying, pretending to repent so Seth will believe he still has a chance. On his next visit, Seth brings her water and a cloth to wash herself, but he can't stop staring at her skin. They talk about the murders, and Holly tells him she enjoys killing. Seth doesn't believe her. He thinks she acts that way out of guilt and trauma. Holly then tells a story about sharks that ram their heads against aquarium glass and starts mimicking them. She only stops when he asks her to, but keeps taunting him, saying that if she gives up now, the police will think he did it. Disturbed, Seth decides to leave. Later, he's called into his supervisor's office and scolded for neglecting his duties. She says she won't fire him yet, but will issue a formal warning. One more mistake and he's out. On his next visit, Seth gives Holly only 2 chocolate bars, telling her she needs to understand she's not in control. If she doesn't change her behavior, he'll stop feeding her altogether. Holly tries to manipulate him, claiming she dreamed of the 2 of them living happily together on a beach. Seth softens and agrees to bring more food. As he leaves the restricted area to get snacks, Nate spots him again. Growing suspicious, Nate tries the door, which this time is unlocked. He descends through the hatch and is horrified to find Holly trapped inside the cage. She begs for help, and he starts smashing the padlock to break it open. At that moment, Seth returns and Holly silently signals him to attack. She distracts Nate while Seth sneaks up behind and strikes him in the head. Nate immediately pushes Seth back against the wall. Seth pulls out a knife and stabs him several times before running off. When Nate tries to chase him, Holly stretches out her leg and makes him trip. She then speaks sweetly to Seth, coaxing him to finish Nate off. Seth smashes Nate's head with a concrete block while Holly watches in delight. When it's over, Seth collapses in shock. Holly calms him down and gives him detailed instructions on how to dispose of the body. Using the shelter's veterinary tools, Seth removes all of Nate's teeth, fingerprints, and nails. He then cuts the body into pieces and feeds them to the dogs. Whatever remains is burned in the crematorium. After cleaning himself up, Seth calls his boss and says Nate left to handle some personal matter and never came back. Sometime later, he throws Nate's teeth into the river. When he returns to the shelter, Seth begins scrubbing away the blood while Holly rambles on, teasing him that he's attracted to her because of her dark side. She takes his hand, presses it to her face, and tries to force him into something intimate. But he pulls away. When Seth returns to the administrative area, he finds a detective going through Nate's belongings for clues. The detective questions him about the last time he saw Nate, but Seth's story has inconsistencies. The detective also notices how Seth speaks about Nate in the past tense. The next day, Seth has to move carefully around the shelter, as the detective is still investigating. He brings food to Holly, but she doesn't move or speak. After days of pleading, Seth finally convinces her to talk, and she asks him to give her one of his fingers as proof of love. At first he refuses. Then Holly launches into another manipulative speech about how she's always felt different and disconnected from society, and how only he truly understands her. Seth retreats to the bathroom, panicking for several minutes. After thinking it over, he returns to her. Holly promises to behave if he fulfills her request. Seth sits beside the cage and does exactly what she asked, screaming in pain. Holly pretends she's going to take the finger, but instead grabs the knife and threatens to kill herself unless he frees her. When Seth unlocks the cage, Holly steps out on shaky legs. She pushes him against the wall, tells him she loves him, and kisses him, only to immediately slash his throat. The hallucination of Claire appears again, pointing toward the open door in the background. Sometime later, Holly is back together with Eric. She's also signed a book deal to publish her diary as a fiction novel. When Eric's phone rings, Holly sees the message and discovers he's cheating on her again. Surprisingly calm, she hands him the phone without saying a word. Afterward, Holly visits an abandoned warehouse where she keeps Seth locked in a cage. It turns out she mutilates him whenever she feels the urge to kill someone, meaning that, in a twisted way, Seth really did save her. That's the end. If you liked it, Comment the word saturated fat, subscribe, and leave a like to help an unemployed person. Bye-bye.